Welcome back to another episode of Locked In, where we give you football intel for the modern fan. I am the coach, Dr. Jeremy Locke, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Chance Rollins. And tonight we want to return to our previous discussion of the LA Bowl. For the record, we predicted that Boise State would ride their outstanding running game to a competitive but comfortable win over a UCLA team that seemed decimated by the transfer portal. Of course, this didn't happen as the Bruins scored a big 35-22 win over the Broncos, allowing them to show out in front of a home crowd and secure their third consecutive season with at least 8 wins. So let's begin this episode in the same place as last week. Chip Kelly's seat was beginning to get pretty warm at UCLA in the weeks leading up to the LA Bowl, and I think this win might help to cool things down till next season. And there were some good things that happened on Saturday night for the Bruins, but I want to talk about Coach Kelly for just a bit. One thing that really stood out to me from even the absolute beginning of this game was his willingness to go on third down regardless of where UCLA was at on the field. I thought that was really telling about his attitude toward the game and what he thought about the team. First to see a man, now the first time that I saw him try, he was on his own 35-yard line, roughly. And he was going to go for it on fourth down. And, the announcers were talking about what a bad idea it was. But, he was insistent. Somebody, made a false start, which they had plenty of those. UCLA did. But I thought, even with the willingness to try that, it shows tremendous confidence in his offense. And then also, I think it showed that he wanted the team as a whole to see that, he's aggressive and he trusts them to deliver, whether they're taking a big risk or, conversely, if they're going for, a huge shot downfield, he wants them to see that he has their back and, and he's willing to, ride or die with them.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I think Kelly saw the writing on the wall in
Yeah.
UCLA and wanted to show him that he was going to do what it took to win and that he can do that. I mean, the gag early bowl games in this year, some people just look at them like a gag gift on Christmas, but this one actually came out as a really good gift for most college football fans and especially UCLA fans, winning in a must-win situation. And I think it really sent a message to the players and the fans throughout the LA community, and hopefully they're looking to carry it over into next year.
Yeah, I think that, definitely you can say that Chip Kelly showed that he wants to continue being the head coach at UCLA. And, and the other thing, especially by the time that the late stages of that game were played out, I mean, UCLA totally dominated them. And so I think you have to conclude from that the players seem to have bought in, over the course of the LA Bowl even.
Yeah, it was really good for the whole program and the program status in general, especially with the recruiting and the transfer portal opening them up. It'll really help them a lot in that sense. But at the end of the day, Chip Kelly's not what won them the game or who won them the game. I really think it gets us to who actually did, if you want to bring that up.
Yeah, and I mean, before we jump into that, one of the things that I want to say is that uh, we watched this game, separately, but we both really came to the same conclusion. We're not convinced that clearly UCLA got the win and clearly they impressed, but we don't really think that this win was was all about UCLA winning. I mean, we think that maybe Boise handed this one to them, and this brings us to a segment that we're going to talk about, and we're going to call this segment "Get the Briar." And this phrase "Get the Briar" has got a funny history with us, and it refers back to childhood days living in the mountains when the hickory switch whippings were a present reality. And so in football, we always toss this phrase around to signify that a team or a player who seems to be finished on the field before they even get started, just needs an old fashioned whipping. And in this case, this is the first time we're going to talk about this. So, Chance, I mean, who do you think that in this particular game, who gets the briar? Who needs a good old fashioned pick me up? From their performance in the LA Bowl.
When it comes to the Briar, I think everybody involved with Boise State, whether it be their players, their staff, anybody involved in that game and the calling of it, especially in the second half after they had the game won, they need to go out and get the Briar at some point before the next season so they having a chance.
So what did you see as the most glaring problem with Boise State's at least like you said, with the calling of the game? Would you put more of the weight on the offensive play calling or would you put it on the defense?
The offense seemed to be rolling fine. What it really came down to was that they just stopped running what worked. UCLA was, leaving the flats open, and Boise was hitting them in the first half specifically. But in the third quarter, them flats were still open. No adjustments were made by UCLA on their defense, and Boise State saw them with with UCLA and looked like quarters with everybody at least 7 yards off the line. And I mean, backpedaling at the snap of a ball, and they just wouldn't throw it to the flats, wouldn't even look at it. And it was just
So
something
now,
else.
so if we before we go on, just one thing I want to try to do as we do this is to fall back and we we'll use terms that are, I guess, football folks know them well, but maybe people who are casual watchers or even like, I mean, people who know a bit about the game might not know what we're talking about. So when you say that the UCLA defense looked like they were sitting in quarters coverage, like just briefly explain what that means.
Basically, they had four deep players on the defensive side of the field that their number one um, primary
Objective.
objective
Mhm.
was to not get beat deep. Nobody needs to go past you. You have a quarter of the field. That is your zone. Nobody goes past you in that zone.
And so now these you could almost think of it as being divided just into four tubes, and they run from the beginning place of the defensive back, which is about what roughly 7 yards from the ball,
About
all the
right.
way to the end zone. And they each have a like if we're dividing the field up, just like a cake. I mean, there's equal four parts, and that's what we mean when we say quarters coverage. And now, one of the things that I think, as an offensive play caller, is when I see a team that that's going to, as I would say, sit in quarters coverage. What I know they want me to do is to contest them deep, and it's really hard. A quarterback has to be able to place the ball well if he's throwing vertically down the field against quarters coverage. So what they're saying, in essence, is we want you to take short passes, and we will rally to wherever you're at and make a tackle, and we're going to contain you and not let you beat us deep. Essentially, correct me if you think I'm wrong. I think what UCLA saw in that game, and I wanted to say this, in fairness to Boise State, Boise had a really good backup that that we'd mentioned the other day, but he's been out for an extended period of time. Madsen, I think, is his last name, and so they had to start a freshman quarterback with no experience whatsoever, and so when UCLA sees that inexperienced quarterback, they know that he's going to be very unlikely to one. He himself will be nervous about placing the ball in a tight space. Two, the coaches are not going to let him throw a ball in a tight space, so they're going to control his play calling. So here's the thing. I understand that. I've been there, as a play caller, and I understand, how to work it both ways. And I also know what it's like to have an inexperienced quarterback. But the thing that gets me is for, like what you pointed out, for Boise State to not take advantage of throwing the football into the flats in their case. It is absolutely insane. And there's a particular reason why I think it's insane. Do you want to fill the people in?
Well, their running back, Boise State, that is, Ashton Jaunty, had 399 receiving yards this season. And that means that they're not pushing the ball down the field with some short receiver that is going to be contested by a safety or a corner that can run with them and be taller than them, jump higher than them. No, they're throwing it to the flats, which was open.
And from that game, I mean, Jonty is a hard guy to bring down. He runs hard. And so, like you said, I think having that hard running back out there in the flat, which is, the side, basically near the sidelines, say within, 5 yards around the line of scrimmage. Um, there's some people out there in the world that just don't want to tackle a hard running back out there in that section. And so there's no telling how many yards that guy can get. So I'll second you on giving the briar to Boise State for bad play calling. But here's the thing that I want to think about here. I want to look at it in a little bit bigger of a scope because, there is a there, and I want to give proper context because I know some people, might disagree with, what I'm going to say. In fact, I know that a lot of journalists on the Boise side, would say that I'm dead wrong. But, from watching the game, I know that this is not the case. So let's just start with a question, from me to you. Which is the most accurate statement? UCLA won the LA Bowl walking away, or Boise State lost the LA Bowl through bad play calling?
As you could see, if you watched the game or even watched some highlights for 10 minutes, or even just the second half of the game after knowing the score from halftime, Boise State definitely lost the LA Bowl because of their play calling on offense.
Okay, well, I agree. I mean, I guess that's my takeaway from this game. But I want to elaborate on what I think was happening. And really, I know that at the moment we don't have film. Hopefully, we get that worked out, in the coming, days or weeks. But this is one that you can really pinpoint on a few just individual plays. Nevertheless, let me kind of explain my case. So I think that for some reason, Boise State's play callers became very aware in the late second quarter that they had a quarterback with no college football experience. And I understand where they're coming from, but to tell you the truth, I don't get it. And now, one thing, if you do just a Google search, you'll find a Google search related to the LA Bowl. The journalists surrounding Boise State Broncos have said repeatedly that the narrative of this loss is very simple. A strong UCLA defense stepped up and stopped Boise State's running game and forced the inexperienced freshman quarterback, to bear the weight of the offense. And as a result, the Broncos sputtered their way to a double-digit loss. And honestly, like as is the case in a lot of games with this kind of score, 35-22, the loss is actually worse than the score suggests because the Boise's last touchdown was an afterthought. So you'd be fair to say that that this game was really more like a 35-17 come from behind win for UCLA. So do you think in that part that saying that the defense shut them down is correct?
No, I think this these journalists would really remind you of Boise State a lot by saying that that's some BS. Is what I think, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's my take on it, but I understand why they're selling it this way. Interim head coach, had the interim tag taken away. Absolute freshman quarterback, and in all fairness, it's easy to poke fun at UCLA's pass defense, but their rush defense is, I mean, it's a championship level defense. So I see why they're saying that. In fact, I think right now that they're ranked number one in the country for rush defense. I mean, they're very very impressive. It's either them or Penn State. They're neck and neck. Um, but nevertheless, so if I want to pinpoint the problem, if I'm going in and I'm analyzing this film, I think the beginning of Boise State's problems came on the last possession of the first half. Now, bear in mind they did score a touchdown that put them up 16-7. But the thing that I want you to notice here is that once the Broncos made it deep into Bruin territory, thanks to a pass interference penalty, the yards per carry went down significantly. Okay, 12 yards on 6 plays. And one of these, now this is the way that I think about these averages. That's a 2 yard per play average, which is not very good. But think of this. One of those plays was a 1 yard touchdown by George Holani, which obviously goofs a running total. If you're a running back, you know what a 1 yard touchdown does to your average. And another one was a 1 yard 4th-and-1 run by Ashton Jeanty. And UCLA clamped down on the run near the goal line. Heck, I mean, they're a top 2 or 3 rush defense in the country. They are going to do that. But nevertheless, Boise State produced a touchdown, with the run. And here's the funny thing. They abandoned the run early in the second half, but think about these numbers. They're up 16-7 at halftime. They've gained in one half 26 rushing yards on 24 carries. That's 5.25 yards per carry. That's a dang good average against arguably the best rushing defense in college football. So if I come to you, say it's halftime, you are the head coach, you're the play caller, whoever, of the Boise State Broncos at halftime, and I run down to you and give you, the stats from, the booth, and I say, hey, coach, like obviously we're up 16-7, halftime, we're getting the ball back to start the second half. We've ran it for 126 yards on 24 carries, 5.25 per carry. Uh, they're a very good run defense. We're crushing them. What do you think we need to do in the second half? What would your obvious answer be?
It'd be to get Sandra Bullock down there like in the blind side and say, run the dang ball.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Keep running the ball. But here's what's crazy and what I'll never understand. I'm not a huge believer in halftime adjustments because it's a short amount of time and people got to get a drink, people got to pee. That's what really happens in a halftime locker room. So I'm never a huge believer in like a magical adjustment. But, by God, Boise State, they adjusted. They stopped running the football. So they start the third quarter after coming out with a 9-point lead. That's a 2-score lead. It might not be pretty how they got there, but it's a 2-score lead, 9 points. They could have driven the field with the run, giving it to Halani and Jonty and throwing like the occasional pass if they need to. They score another touchdown. They're up 23-7. That's a tight ball game or a tough spot for UCLA to come out of. But here's what happens. They open up with a pass. Very dangerous, in my opinion, because if it's not complete, you are behind the sticks. So they're able to make up for that pass because they can take a little risk. They can, UCLA's expecting run. They give them pass, okay, loosens them up a little bit. They hit a 7-yard run. I think it was Halani. And so they're left in at that point, a 3rd and 3. Okay, you're running the ball. You got two hard running backs that are having a lot of success, especially with that little guard halfback counter play they were running, and even on just straight zone dives. You need 3 yards. It's 3rd down. What do you call? If you're me, I'm either going to call one of those two plays. I'm either going to dive it straight at them or I'm going to run that counter. Either way that it works, I'm getting my first down on the ground because it's 3 yards and we're averaging over 5 a carry. What do? They throw a shoot route to an H-back on 3rd and 3 that picks up 1 yard. Blew my mind. So less than 90 seconds from the second half kickoff, Broncos turn the ball right back over to the Bruins. Now, this is one of my preferences, as a coach. I think one of the best ways to win a football game is doing what I call wrapping the half. And what I mean when I say wrapping the half is I want to score a touchdown to end the second quarter, as close to the end of the second quarter as I can get, and then receive the ball to start the second half and score another touchdown after killing the first several minutes of the third quarter. I mean, to me, I think if you're a team like Boise State that's trying to conceal an inexperienced quarterback, and you have two really good running backs and an offensive line that's getting the job done, you run that ball down the field, you kill 6 minutes off the clock. UCLA's whole game plan has to change. So my question is, do you think that Boise State wrongly believed that UCLA's performance on the goal line, where they held them for like a wrongly understood 2 yard per carry average, meant that they ought to lead with the pass to open up the run game in the second half? Do you think that's what they were thinking?
I mean, they must have been thinking, or you know what? They must have not been thinking at all, because when you're up in a ball game, usually teams try to be conservative and run the ball more to get the clock going. Because once the clock drains down, the team that has to come from behind has less time to do it and is pressured to do so more.
Yeah, and that's my thought. So I mean, to me, I think that they let their perception of the moment and their perception of what you can do with or what's going to happen with a freshman quarterback with no experience. I think they let that perception overwhelm what was actually unfolding on the field. And so I'll say I think that a lot of it's all speculative. Honestly, we're not there with them in the booth. We're not on the headsets. We're not privy to the conversations. But nevertheless, I think that that's a legit analysis of their thought process, because they fall into a similar pattern after they face adversity again, on the next possession in the second half. And this one, I think, this was when the game really got away from them. I think they could have made up for that first possession, but this one, it hurt. So they returned to their run first approach, gained 6 yards on first down, and Then on the second down, and then they completed, excuse me, they gained 6 yards, got themselves, on second down into a short third down. I think it was 3rd and 4, and they basically ran a little rollout flood, which featured the inside receiver on the left side running about, a 5 yard drag. And he, as they always are, you can just take this one, this is a free gift, I guess. On the rollout pass, if you have a receiver worth his salt, the drag is always open. So just have your quarterback throw it. So, good job on that play call. Now I thought, this is good. This is really good. Get settled back down. You return to your run game. You're still averaging over 5 yards. You've already had a 7 yard run and a 6 yard run. So stay with the run, Boise State. That's what I'm saying as I'm sitting there watching it. Well, here's what happens. Instead of staying with the run, they call just a standard running back screen to Ashton Jeanty. Now, if you're looking at this in, I guess, just the general picture, you might say, hey, that's not a bad call. But I disagree strongly with calling that play at that point. And so I think there are 3 reasons, why this isn't the right call. First of all, a running back screen is designed to take advantage of an aggressive pass rush, which UCLA does show at times on passing downs. They've recorded several sacks this season, quite a good pass rushing team. So here's the thing. The play makes sense if this is a passing situation, but it makes no sense when the defensive line will be near the line of scrimmage defending the run, especially since Boise State had only passed twice on first down in the game. This being one of them. UCLA is not expecting the pass from the freshman quarterback. They're expecting the run from Holani or Jeanty. And so they're sitting in the spots where they're probably going to be able to pressure a screen pass. So although this is a second point, although your running back screen seems like it's an easy play to execute, it's really more nuanced than what you think. If you've ever tried to, you either run one or you've called one in a game. So in this case, C.J. Tiller, the Boise State quarterback, didn't see the right inside linebacker, who read the play, like a book, and tackled Jeanty for a 4 yard loss. You could see him on the film. You would see him coming straight at him as soon as he read screen pass and just wallops the guy as soon as he catches the ball. Now, here's the third point. Builds off the second. An inexperienced quarterback is naturally worried about not messing up. And so here's what he's thinking. Don't throw an interception. Don't throw an incomplete pass. So he is going to make that completion to the running back on that screen, even if it hurts the team. So here's what Tiller should have done. When he saw Jeanty and he saw the outline of the linebacker behind him, he should have thrown this ball dead at Jeanty's feet where he could not catch it. And it would fall incomplete, and you go right back to the line of scrimmage. Tough break, we didn't get it, but it's 2nd and 10, and we got 2 good running backs. Instead, he lands his team in 2nd and 14, and as a result, forces their hand to do things that they probably don't want to do with the offense. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think it brings up the moral of the whole game, which is when you're up, protect your lead, run the ball, especially with a quarterback. You don't want them passing on first downs, and you don't even want to pass on first downs most of the time with an experienced quarterback, even a Heisman candidate. So just always realize what your offensive game plan is and how you should execute it on certain possessions and during certain times of the ball game, during certain field positions. You just have to be situationally aware. And
Yeah, that's the phrase.
yeah, we'll
And
just
one thing I wanted to add too, just something that you said is, and I know that some people will say, well, there are lots of teams that, that throw the ball on first down. Not really. There has to be a reason. Like there has to be a very specific, like game plan oriented reason to have you do it. It's like, for instance, some teams want to shoot one downfield early because they think there's something they can take advantage of. Maybe they have a good outside linebacker that's going to cause them problems. So you want to play games with him and have like an over under or like a high low concept on him to get him to, not being as instinctual as he otherwise might be. Or what most people are thinking of is whenever you see the quick screens to wide receivers that a lot of the spread teams run. But here's the deal. Correct me if I'm wrong. those teams view the wide screens to receivers as an extension of the running game, not a piece of the passing game. And so for them, they would tell you, yeah, we're running the ball on first down. It just looks different. That's what most spread coaches will tell you. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree, especially since most of the time they throw it behind the line of scrimmage and the ball goes backwards. So even if they do drop it, which they usually don't since it's a give me pass,
Right.
then you could just pick it up and run with it, which is why you see people always try to get the ball on the drop screens.
That's exactly it. And I mean, and very often these plays are good for, 3 to 5 yards. So why not try them? And another thing too, and that's even with Boise State, I can't believe they didn't work that more because to me, if you're worried about what a defensive line can do to you, I mean, the outside screen game, it makes those guys run. And the more you make 300-pound defensive linemen run, the more that team is going to substitute. And that's going to help you out. And you can call your shots there. But so, as we go on a little bit, I want to look at one specific play a little on after this that really hurt. I think this might have been in some ways the nail in the coffin for Boise State. And so, just in general, we're saying that Boise State's poor coordination on offense really hurt them. And then, 2 plays after the failed running back screen, they face a gigantic 3rd and 14. UCLA is gaining momentum, and and the problem here, you wanted to shield this young quarterback from just dead on passing situations. You don't get much more passing situation than 3rd and 14. And so, the thing of it is they run 3 straight passes and it kills their drive inside their territory. And to me, it felt like a funeral. It's like, you felt like it was, the end was already there. But the joke of it all is, I mean, leading for them, it's a joke as you're watching it if you're not invested. At this point, they're still winning 16-14. Yet it feels like momentum has completely left, and UCLA's fixing to run away with this game, which they pretty well did after this point. So, what do you say?
Yeah, I
Like if
think
you, if
they
you were
was
in that huddle, we'll go ahead with what you were going to say.
so I think they was trying to do a little too much, especially since it's a young quarterback. He's also trying to do too much with the play calls given to him at this point. With that momentum shift, they set up in that two back shotgun formation. Had the
Right.
twins to the left side, and then they made a motion. Which is usually good to help notice a coverage on the defensive side, so you know who's going to throw it or where you're going to throw it because you'll know where they're going to be because a motion
So
is really
hang on
good.
just a second. With that one, once again, let's explain what we mean. If we're sitting here, now what we would like, what I think most coaches now call this is they'll call it tear motion, like because literally the running back tears out of his position, full sprint, headed to the sideline. Now you say that that's going to indicate what the coverage is because what's going to happen? What happens? Say if you are in man coverage and that running back sprints to the sideline.
If you're in man coverage on the defense, whoever is on that man in motion, they're going to have to run with them in motion. And if they don't, usually the defense will shift because one side will now be unbalanced, usually the opposite side. So you'll either see a shift at least or a direct motion following the man that the man is on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it was a great play call. Near perfect. Gave them 3-man pressure from UCLA, and there were 7 defenders standing at the line of scrimmage at the snap. So I mean, the Bruins would have to drop into their zones from the line, which make it almost impossible to beat something that's so quick for a
Yeah.
pass. And it's hard to pick up someone already traveling in motion, which would be the man in motion, um, and especially for verticals and blockers. And if they just send it to Jaunty right there, he'd be carrying defenders the way he runs. I'm not
Yeah.
convinced that he would have gotten the first down, but I mean, he could have. The rule is give it to your man, the guy, give it to the guy, let
Mhm.
him do something with the ball, especially since the Bruins hadn't been tackling him well in space all night. Since his gain was 5.2 yards a play, he'd probably get at least 8 and help them
Yeah.
get the field position to then also help with punting and get them pinned back on offense. UCLA, that is.
Yeah, and so like what we're saying here, this works. Like most people, I think, understand what a screen pass is, but what we're saying is when you see a running back like Jonty shoot out to the flats, just shoot sideways from the quarterback, two receivers on that side going downfield, they have to cover them or else they risk, a deep pass. You look deep, turn sideways, throw the ball to him. Now, one of the things that I don't think that that we've mentioned is after this play, you can go back and watch, and Jonty is literally throwing a 5-year-old fit on the field, basically saying, "Why didn't you throw me the ball?" And I can't blame him for being upset. So the question that I have, why do you think that CJ Tiller, the Boise State quarterback, why didn't he just dunk the ball off to Jonty and see what he can create? Because, like you said, he is your man.
Well, I'd say it's probably because that young, inexperienced quarterback was trying to make something happen. And the play design for that specific play didn't really help at all. You could see from the backside camera that it was basically a no-read shot play to the outside left receiver, the X receiver on an
Mm-hmm.
inside release go route. And I mean, it isn't unusual for coaches to control a quarterback by limiting his route choices. And when this works, the quarterback looks brilliant. And when it doesn't, he looks like he's running for his life. The second happens on this play, and he did run for his life.
Definitely. Because here's the first problem that you really get with this play. Gabriel Murphy, UCLA's got two brothers. I mean, they might even be twins. I didn't look into see if they're twins. Gabriel and Galen Murphy, both of them recorded sacks in this game. He is their best pass rusher. And so, or at least in this game, they have another one who's better, but who I think he just set the game out. So he achieves the number one objective on a definite passing down. He put Tiller off of his spot and he made him rush or flush out to the right side. So the motion was a good call because what happened with having those two receivers out there and having Jonty shoot from the backfield, the only person who could have covered him when they dropped into their zone coverages was Gabriel Murphy, the rushing end. And he can't be in two places at the same time. So throwing the ball to the back was really the correct play right here, I think. But there
Yeah,
was another problem that kind of, I guess, raised its head, in this moment.
yeah. The other problem with that is Boise's quarterback only had one place to go with the ball.
Yeah.
And if you watch his head, I mean, he is dialed in on that X
Yes, he
receiver.
is. He
And I mean, he's
definitely is.
he's wide open. I mean, he's almost 25 yards down the field. And even as Tiller moves to the right, the throw's still there. The left safety moves with the quarterback, trailing him, and further opens up the throwing window. If he had just stepped up in the pocket, he probably would have completed the pass and got the first down. But
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
so.
throwing across body, it's something that you don't really get taught to do as a quarterback because it is so dangerous, especially since you can't really see that side of the field because you don't want to throw a pick, especially being that inexperienced. So he just went to the boundary to protect the ball and moved on to the next play, and it resulted in a sack. And Boise State did not leave a receiver on the right side of the field. So,
Man, and that's what got me because when you watch this play, like I don't know, especially knowing who he is, knowing that CJ Tiller is a, absolute green freshman, no experience in college. I don't think he did a terrible job because, they have told him protect the ball, don't take risks, protect the ball. They set him up with a shot play over here, and that's what he's going to throw to. Because I mean, I can, unless you're dealing with a crazy man, if you tell a young quarterback where to throw the football, he's going to throw the football to that spot. Like even if you like with high school quarterbacks, you give a tag as a suggestion, but you have to bear in mind they don't want to mess up. They don't want to displease you. They're going to throw that ball to where you have tagged it because they think that's where you want it instead of just where you want them to look first. I think they probably tagged the vertical route to the outside receiver, which was a great route. And what ended up happening was instead of thinking they have a good pass rusher on that side that's going to collapse the pocket and make him move, and he's not going to throw across his body, because it's an odd thing. And I mean, I don't know how many people have experience with it, but when you're making that move, a lot of times and you're kind of rolling out, you almost have to step with your back foot to get that ball thrown correctly. And you could tell that Tiller knew the throw was there, but he wasn't going to take that risk. Let's sprint out, find a guy coming back to me on the opposite side of the field. But man, nobody was there. Nobody was there. And so I'm with you to go back, to the theme of get the briar. Whoever did not put the right side wide receiver on a comeback or some play to where he could break off his route and come back and help, this young quarterback out. I honestly think they're out of their mind, because that's going to happen. I mean, this kid is athletic. He's going to scramble out of the pocket. And when he does, if you ran like Boise did, you ran that receiver into the heart of the formation, all he can do is eat the sack. And so all of a sudden, 3rd and 14 becomes 4th and 17. And I just think that they could have really put him in a better position to succeed, especially when the team was already succeeding. This was a catastrophic loss of momentum, and they never came back from it.
Yeah, being ahead by 2 points, it's almost like they were playing from behind and trying to push the ball down the field and force the ball
Yeah.
places that it shouldn't go. And I mean, it might have not have seemed like it while they were up, but Boise State lost that game trying to air things out and do things that they probably shouldn't have done, try different things instead of just running the ball. So they really just handed the game right to UCLA.
Yeah, I agree. And and I'll also say that Boise State short possessions in the early third, whenever they were handing the ball back to UCLA, you gave an offensive genius the two things that you should never give him. More weapons and more time. If you give Chip Kelly time to think, it's the worst thing you can do. And they played right into his hands. And and the thing that I think nobody could have seen coming that night, and we were really expecting it last week, even though he didn't make the start. Um, I guess things just basically compounded whenever UCLA starting quarterback Colin Schlee, who had ran the ball, I mean, like a deer all over Boise State that night, left the game, after he got, took a rough hit to the head, on the sideline, actually hit the ground. And it forced the Bruins to play their intended starter, Ethan Garbers, who we all thought was going to start and who, we bragged on last week, on this show. So if we give the briar to the play calling on the Boise State side, I guess if we're going to give the crown to somebody, it's Mr. Ethan Garbers, because that dude changed the game. You got anything just in general to say about what he did the other night?
Yeah, Mr. Garbers came out and he flushed the pot, that's for sure. He had a spectacle of a performance, throwing for 2 touchdowns without throwing a pick. His QBR was almost 100. I mean, he had 152
Yeah.
yards, and he had a comeback from behind victory that he can go in and mark down. So I mean, it really leaves him in a good position for next year, especially with the decision making that he had that night.
Yeah. And the thing that I think stands out so much, like if we've got their stats right in front of us. If you look at them, you're like, well, that's not that big of a difference when you look at a lot of the numbers. 2 touchdowns to 1 touchdown, 73 to 98 on QBR. That's a big difference. But what made that difference? So we look at the percentages: 11 to 16. It's not a bad night for Schlee. 9 of 12 for Garbers. You're like, yeah, that's good. But 11 to 16s and is nothing to toss out. But man, look at that average.
Yep, that's
12.7 for Garbers and 4.9 for Schlee. What that tells me is that until Garbers came in this game, Chip Kelly was playing a better version of what Boise State was having to do with his inexperienced quarterback. They were not pushing the ball. Now they had Chip Kelly. I mean, in my opinion, he runs lacrosse about as good as anybody. It's always really pretty to see how he does it. And he hit one, like I've always, I was thinking watching that play, and I think about watching Chip Kelly's lacrosse all the time. You hear a lot of coaches on offense say that in the running game, that power is God's play. You kick out the end, wrap, the guard around, double team 3 technique, and just run it, off tackle. That's God's play because it works when it's executed. Well, if God had a passing play, it'd be Wycross. And it was so funny because Chip Kelly calls this play, and it's like the wide receiver who is typically in a spread formation, the inside receiver to the right. It's like you will catch the ball at a spot 22 yards at a 45-degree angle down the field, dead on 22 yards. Absolutely perfect. Anybody or any quarterback can make that throw, and that helped Schlee catch a lot of yardage right there. He had, maybe one more that was a decent one, but as soon as Garbers came into the game, man, it was 15 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, whatever. And he had been sick, and that was the reason that he wasn't playing, is that he himself had said he didn't want to play because he was feeling that bad. He's the leader of the team, and we found that out. And Chip Kelly had said as much after the game, but he was quite ill. And so when he comes in, his comment was, the team really needed me to come through whenever Schlee went down. And so he comes in and right off the bat, bam, hits a slant for a touchdown on his first pass. And is just eating the Boise State defense alive. And you could, just as we talked about seeing the life be sucked out of Boise's offense, you saw Garbers whipping the Boise State defense like a dog. And then on top of that, one of the things that, that we have to mention is that the UCLA running game, man, they mashed them. That's all you can say, is that they totally mashed them. 7.8 yards rushing as a team. I mean,
Yeah.
on what planet does that happen?
On this one, apparently, that's
Clearly,
almost a first down every time you run the ball.
that's exactly it. And the thing that gets me, Garbers is back. Now, we're talking last week about UCLA losing like basically half of a football team to the transfer portal and what that signified. And, and we also made mention that Chip Kelly's one of those coaches that came out publicly and said, if you're transferring out, there's the door. You're not playing in this game, which, good for him. But after watching that offense with Garbers running it, I can see why he didn't give a rip if all those guys left. And I can't, I don't know. I can't understand why Garbers. Maybe if we want to actually for the season, maybe we want to give Chip Kelly a whipping for not keeping Garbers in and having this, quarterback controversy out there. Because this guy did exactly what his season stats said he was going to do. He doesn't turn it over. He can throw it down the field, and he's an athlete. He can pick up yards whenever you need it. And one of the things that stood out to me is TJ Harden, who is a big running back. This guy looks like he's in that 215, 220 range. Average 5.3, 20 carries for 105 yards, ripped off a 27-yarder. He's back next year. Garbers is back next year. And he averaged 12.7, had, some really nice runs. And then, the other thing that, you got to say, that J. Michael Sturdivant, let me make sure on this before I make a total fool of myself. I am almost convinced that he is coming back.
He's a sophomore this year, so
yeah,
he
oh
will
my
be
God,
back.
man, a sophomore, 4 yards for 142 and a touchdown. All three of those guys are coming back, and Chip Kelly's got from now till September the tinker. What do you think about UCLA going to the Big Ten with that next year?
I think it could definitely shake some things up. I'm not saying that UCLA is going to go in the big and win it all. That's probably not going to happen. But I believe they'll give some people a run for their money, give them a few thoughts to worry about, especially with Chip Kelly being there. You never know what he's going to pull out of his magic hat. I think they should honestly have a winning record next year. And I know the Pac-12 isn't really my favorite, and I believe it is an easier to play in, a easier conference to play in. But I believe that after going 8-5 this year, I think they'll probably be around the same in a debatably harder conference.
I think so. I think it would be a really big deal if they could. Let's say UCLA finishes the season with 8 or 9 wins. I think that's an enormous deal for them. And you got a really good defense coming back. I know that they're losing a great pass rusher to the NFL, no doubt. But if the Murphy brothers come back, you've got your coming in with, a returning top 5 rushing defense. You got these offensive weapons going. I think they got a shot. And, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think you see them knocking off, Michigan or Ohio State or even Penn State. I don't think that happens, but it'll be interesting to watch. And, and I know that Chip Kelly has to be feeling pretty good, after that LA Bowl. And that just goes back. Like, I mean, if we could, finish and, in one of the places that we started at, is it is so easy to dismiss these really just no-name bowls. It's so easy to do it, and you see players who sit out of them. You hear stories, and just recent college football history about players, that let's tank a game. Like I think about the Tennessee Kentucky game back a few years ago. Whenever I was on Tennessee's campus, and I heard this from a lot of people, and it even got into the media that that. I think it was who was it? Was it Tyler Bray who just said, hey, let's tank. Who wants to stay on campus, all winter break and go play in the Liberty Bowl in Memphis. People do that. I mean, that's a thing. Nobody wants to go to these games, it seems. But I'm telling you, man, UCLA's in a better position tonight because they accepted it and they went and they took care of business. So I think that these little games can change the narrative for a season.
Yeah, especially someone who's aspiring to be better in a better conference. And looking at their schedule next year, they honestly might have more than 8 wins.
That could be an interesting time. Who do they have just offhand?
Hawaii,
Or I
which
guess
is
who do they miss? I guess.
all right. I'll tell you who they lose against just looking at it. I think they lose to LSU. I think they lose to Oregon. I think they take a loss at Penn State. I think they lose against Iowa. And then the only other two that you could debate is I'd say Nebraska and Washington are the only other 2 losses that you could debate. So they either lose 4, 5, or 6 games, in my opinion. They could win more possibly.
It'd be a good season.
Yeah, it would be.
And I'm really interested to see how that works out because are they at Iowa?
They are at home against Iowa.
Okay, so they're at home. So I think I'd like to watch that game because I mean, just from what that they showed in the LA Bowl, I really think those two teams kind of match up well. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, it'll be a slobber knocker. I think UCLA plays pretty physical, and we know what Iowa does. But one that I'm really just I'd be interested to see how they play out, kind of like those East Coast West Coast games. Conference game for UCLA, State College, Pennsylvania. That is a long road trip to go into a wild environment. Because I mean, that. I mean, if both teams have some success early, that's going to be a night game, and it's going to be a whiteout, and that's asking a lot, I think.
That is asking a ton, especially with
And
how
that's a
Penn
lot of
State
jet
looked
lag.
this year.
You're trying to figure out a new team and a new world. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But I think we can close out though by saying that the LA Bowl. If you watched it, you got to watch some interesting football. There's a lot to be said about it. And if you missed it, I think you missed out on seeing something that could become a little bit of a narrative, like with the maybe the uh, breath of new life that's in UCLA next year. Do we have anything else to say before we close it out?
The only other thing I'd add is look for Garbers next year, trying to get in that Heisman race with how he ended out this year.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I mean, he was really feeling it the other night, and that was one of those. I mean, we anticipated that, so it's always fun whenever you say, "I think this guy's going to deliver," and he flat out delivered. So I guess that's going to do it, for us here, Locked In, for the LA Bowl, and we look forward to joining you again, to talk about another couple of bowl games here a little later.